Weather wars refers to the alleged use of atmospheric manipulation technologies by governments and military organizations to control weather patterns as weapons of warfare or economic disruption. The foundation of these claims centers around facilities like the High-Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, known as HAARP, located in Alaska. This installation uses a massive array of radio antennas to beam concentrated energy into the ionosphere, officially for atmospheric research. The facility can generate up to 3.6 megawatts of radio frequency power, making it one of the most powerful installations of its kind. Weather modification isn't entirely theoretical. Operation Popeye during the Vietnam War used cloud seeding techniques to extend monsoon seasons and flood enemy supply routes. The United States military spent over $20 million between 1967 and 1972 deploying silver iodide particles from aircraft to artificially enhance rainfall over the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Modern weather warfare allegedly involves ionospheric heaters like HAARP, creating atmospheric disturbances that can redirect jet streams, intensify storm systems, or trigger seismic activity. These installations exist in multiple countries, including Norway's IceCat facility, Russia's Sura ionospheric heating facility, and China's similar research stations. Specific incidents fuel these theories. Hurricane Katrina's unusual behavior patterns, the 2010 Haiti earthquake occurring near HAARP operational dates, and unusual drought patterns in targeted regions have all been attributed to weather manipulation programs. The technology reportedly works by heating sections of the ionosphere to create atmospheric bulges that alter wind patterns and precipitation cycles. By precisely timing these interventions, weather systems can allegedly be steered toward specific targets or dissipated entirely. Countries like Venezuela have formally accused the United States of using weather modification against them during severe drought periods, while similar accusations have emerged from Iran and other nations experiencing unusual weather events coinciding with political tensions. Ultima Thule represents one of the most disturbing intersections between ancient mythology and modern racial conspiracy theories. This entry traces back to a legendary northern land first described by Greek explorer Pytheas around 320 BC, who claimed to have discovered an island at the very edge of the known world where the sun never set. The conspiracy theory gained its most sinister form through the Thule Society, a German occult group founded in Munich after World War I. These mystics believed Ultima Thule was not merely a mythical place, but the actual capital city of an ancient civilization called Hyperborea. According to their doctrine, this was the original homeland of a superior Aryan race that once ruled the earth with advanced technology and divine powers. The Thule Society taught that this master race had descended from the stars and established their civilization in the extreme Arctic north, near present-day Greenland or Iceland. Members had to sign blood declarations swearing they had no Jewish or non-white ancestry, believing only pure descendants of these Hyperborean Aryans could access their ancient wisdom and reclaim their rightful dominance over inferior races. What makes this particularly chilling is that the Thule Society directly spawned the German Workers' Party, which Adolf Hitler later reorganized into the Nazi Party. Key figures like Rudolf Hess, Alfred Rosenberg, and Dietrich Eckart were all connected to the society, helping weave these occult racial theories into Nazi ideology. Modern conspiracy theorists have expanded on these ideas, claiming expeditions were mounted to Antarctica searching for surviving Hyperborean technology, or that underground civilizations still maintain contact with surface dwellers. Some even suggest the recent NASA spacecraft naming controversy over an object temporarily called Ultima Thule was part of a deliberate occult reference. The theory persists in certain fringe circles as both a geographical mystery and a coded way to promote white supremacist ideology under the guise of ancient history and lost civilizations. The Odessa catacombs stretch beneath the Ukrainian port city like a massive stone spiderweb, forming what many consider the largest underground maze on Earth. These tunnels weren't built by ancient civilizations or government agencies, but carved out over centuries by limestone miners who left behind several thousand kilometers of interconnected passages. What makes these catacombs a magnet for conspiracy theorists isn't just their sheer size, but the absolute secrecy that has shrouded activities within them for decades. During World War II, Soviet partisans used these tunnels as an underground fortress, and some researchers claim entire sections remain sealed off, containing evidence of classified operations that continued long after the war ended. The most haunting case involves a young woman named Masha, who entered the catacombs during a New Year's party in 2005 and vanished into the limestone labyrinth. When her remains were discovered 2 years later, investigators found she had traveled deep into unexplored sections, raising questions about what might have drawn her so far from the known entrance points. Local urban explorers report discovering rooms filled with Soviet-era equipment, unexplained electrical systems still drawing power, and passages that seem to lead towards sensitive government facilities above ground. Some claim to have encountered other people in the depths, individuals who clearly knew the tunnel system intimately but refused to explain their presence. The Ukrainian government maintains strict restrictions about catacomb access, officially citing safety concerns, but researchers point to the convenient timing of these restrictions, which intensified just as independent investigators began mapping connections between the tunnels and certain municipal buildings. What adds credibility to these theories is the catacombs' documented history as a smuggling network, moving everything from contraband goods to people across international borders. If such operations existed openly for generations, the reasoning goes, what covert activities might still be operating in the unmapped sections that authorities claim don't exist? Forest terror refers to a collection of theories suggesting that something deeply sinister is happening in America's national forests and wilderness areas. The most prominent of these centers around the missing 411 phenomenon documented by former police detective David Paulides. Since 2012, Paulides has cataloged over 1,400 cases of people who have vanished under bizarre circumstances in national parks and forests. These aren't your typical lost hiker stories. The cases share disturbing patterns that defy conventional explanations. The disappearances often occur in broad daylight, sometimes with witnesses nearby who report hearing no screams or sounds of struggle. Tracking dogs brought to search scenes frequently cannot pick up any scent trail, which occurs in 99% of the documented cases. Bodies are later discovered in areas that search teams had already thoroughly combed, appearing in impossible locations or at elevations the person could never have reached on their own. The victims don't fit a random pattern either. Many are experienced outdoorsmen, hikers, and hunters who knew their terrain well. Children as young as 2 years old have been found miles away from their last known location, across treacherous terrain that would challenge adult climbers. Some survivors who are found alive display memory gaps and can't explain what happened during their disappearance. Paulides claims that when he began investigating, an unnamed park ranger approached him, expressing concern about the questionable nature of these missing person cases and the Park Service's handling of them. The National Park Service doesn't maintain a centralized database of missing persons, leading to speculation about whether they're deliberately concealing the scope of the problem. The theories surrounding these disappearances range from underground tunnel systems and secret government experiments to interdimensional portals and cryptid abductions. Some point to the proximity of military bases and classified research facilities near many disappearance sites. Others suggest that Bigfoot or other unknown creatures are systematically hunting humans in these remote areas. Adding to the forest terror narrative are recent conspiracy theories about wildfire origins. During Canada's record-breaking 2023 wildfire season, theories emerged claiming environmentalists or government agents were deliberately setting fires to push climate change agendas or force population relocations into so-called 15-minute cities. In a bizarre twist, one Canadian man who had posted conspiracy theories claiming the government was starting wildfires was later arrested for setting 14 fires himself. The forest terror concept taps into primal fears about venturing into the wilderness and suggests that vast areas of publicly owned land harbor secrets the government doesn't want citizens to discover. Whether through unexplained disappearances, deliberate ecological manipulation, or hidden research programs, these theories paint America's most pristine natural areas as carefully managed zones of deception and danger. Ever-full cups represent one of the most persistent claims in suppressed technology circles. These devices allegedly produce unlimited amounts of liquid without any external input, violating conventional physics while operating through principles that mainstream science refuses to acknowledge. The concept centers around containers that continuously refill themselves, typically with water, though some accounts describe cups that produce wine, oil, or other specific liquids. Unlike perpetual motion machines that generate energy, these devices supposedly create matter from seemingly nothing. Medieval European accounts describe goblets owned by nobility that never emptied during feasts, often attributed to divine blessing or alchemical knowledge. The Welsh Mabinogion mentions vessels that provide endless sustenance, while similar objects appear in Celtic and Norse traditions. However, modern researchers claim these weren't mere folklore, but documentation of actual technology. Contemporary reports focus on devices allegedly developed by inventors who were subsequently silenced or disappeared. Patents filed in the early 1900s describe mechanisms using specific mineral compositions and geometric designs that supposedly tap into what some call zero-point energy or quantum vacuum fluctuations. Dr. Wilhelm Reich's later work allegedly included experiments with vessels that demonstrated anomalous water production, though these findings were reportedly confiscated during government raids on his facilities. Similar claims surround the work of Victor Schauberger, whose water-related inventions supposedly included self-replenishing systems. The technology allegedly works through precise arrangements of certain crystals, specific metal alloys, and geometric configurations that create what proponents call matter condensation fields. These arrangements supposedly extract hydrogen and oxygen from ambient electromagnetic fields, combining them into water molecules. Government suppression of this technology allegedly stems from its potential to eliminate water scarcity and disrupt existing resource control systems. Control of water distribution represents significant geopolitical power, making free water generation a threat to established interests. Some researchers claim these devices still exist in private collections, though their locations remain closely guarded secrets passed down through specific bloodlines or secret societies. Soft disclosure psyops represents the belief that governments and intelligence agencies are deliberately releasing classified information about extraterrestrial life, advanced technologies, and other hidden realities through carefully orchestrated media campaigns and entertainment programming. The theory suggests that rather than shocking the public with sudden revelations, these organizations are conditioning society through a gradual drip feed of information. This approach allegedly prevents mass panic while slowly acclimating people to extraordinary truths. Believers point to the Pentagon's release of 3 Navy videos showing unidentified aerial phenomena in 2020, footage that had circulated in conspiracy circles for years before official acknowledgement. The establishment of the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office and congressional hearings featuring military officials discussing UAP encounters are seen as continuation of this strategy. Hollywood productions receive particular scrutiny under this framework. Films like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Independence Day, and television series like The X-Files are viewed not as entertainment but as psychological preparation tools. The theory extends to documentaries, news segments, and even social media campaigns that introduce concepts once considered fringe. Former intelligence officials like Luis Elizondo and Christopher Mellon, who transitioned from classified roles to public UFO advocacy, are often cited as key figures in this alleged operation. Their media appearances and book releases are interpreted as sanctioned information dissemination rather than whistleblowing. The soft disclosure timeline supposedly spans decades, with proponents identifying patterns in when certain topics enter mainstream discussion. Topics progress from ridicule to acknowledgement to acceptance, following what believers describe as a predictable psychological operations playbook. This theory encompasses not just extraterrestrial phenomena, but also suppressed energy technologies, archaeological discoveries, and medical breakthroughs that could fundamentally alter human civilization if released without preparation. Lung-gom-pa refers to an ancient Tibetan running meditation practice that supposedly allows practitioners to achieve impossible feats of speed and endurance. This secretive technique combines deep breathing exercises, visualization, and trance-like states to unlock what believers claim are superhuman locomotive abilities. The practice centers around a specific breathing method called lung, which translates to wind or vital energy, combined with gom-pa meaning meditation. Practitioners spend years in isolated mountain retreats, training their bodies and minds to enter altered states of consciousness while running. According to Tibetan texts and eyewitness accounts from the early 1900s, accomplished lung-gom-pa runners could cover distances of 200 to 300 kilometers in a single day across treacherous Himalayan terrain. Some reports describe practitioners appearing to glide or bounce across the ground with unnaturally long strides, almost as if gravity had less effect on their bodies. The most documented case involves a runner observed by British explorer Alexandra David Neal in Tibet during 1924. She described watching a lone figure moving across a distant plain with mechanical, trance-like movements, covering ground at what seemed an impossible pace. When her party attempted to intercept the runner, he appeared to be in such a deep meditative state that any interruption could prove dangerous or even fatal. The technique allegedly requires practitioners to focus on a specific visualization while maintaining a precise breathing rhythm and gait. The runner enters a trance so deep that they become unaware of their surroundings, terrain, or physical limitations. Modern researchers suggest this practice represents an extreme form of what athletes today call the flow state, but lung-gom-pa reportedly pushes these boundaries far beyond what conventional sports science considers possible. The sheep-goat effect represents one of the most puzzling findings in parapsychology research, suggesting that belief itself might influence psychic abilities. This phenomenon was first documented by psychologist Gertrude Schmeidler at Harvard University in the 1940s. She divided test subjects into two groups based on their attitudes toward extrasensory perception. Those who believed in psychic phenomena she labeled sheep, while skeptics became goats. Schmeidler conducted thousands of ESP card tests using standard Zener cards, those simple symbols of circles, crosses, waves, squares, and stars. What emerged from her data defied conventional expectations. The believers consistently scored above chance levels in identifying hidden cards, while skeptics scored below chance at statistically significant rates. The goats weren't just failing to demonstrate psychic ability, they were actively avoiding correct answers, as if their skepticism created a reverse psychic effect. Over 17 separate experiments involving more than 1,300 subjects, Schmeidler found this pattern held steady. The sheep averaged 5.13 hits per 25 card run, while goats averaged 4.87 hits. Though the individual differences seem small, the consistency across thousands of trials made the results mathematically significant. Later researchers replicated these findings across different laboratories and decades. A 1993 meta-analysis examining 73 studies found the sheep-goat effect appeared in 57% of experiments, with odds against chance of 20 billion to 1. The implications troubled both believers and skeptics. If true psychic phenomena exist, why would attitude affect performance? And if they don't exist, how could skeptics consistently score below random chance? Some researchers proposed that unconscious bias in card handling or subtle sensory cues might explain the effect. Others suggested that believers and skeptics process information differently at fundamental psychological levels. The sheep-goat effect remains one of the most robust findings in parapsychology, yet mainstream science continues to dismiss it entirely. The Mole Kingdom theory suggests that beneath our feet lies an entirely separate civilization of humanoid beings adapted to subterranean life. These alleged underground dwellers supposedly possess enlarged hands for digging, enhanced night vision, and pale skin from generations without sunlight. According to this theory, these beings have constructed vast tunnel networks spanning continents, complete with their own cities, agriculture, and government systems. Believers claim the mole people have been observing surface dwellers for centuries, occasionally emerging through subway systems, basements, and natural cave formations. The theory gained traction in the 1930s when Richard Shaver published stories about underground races in Amazing Stories magazine. Shaver insisted his tales were factual accounts rather than fiction, describing technologically advanced beings living in massive cavern systems. Supporters point to unexplained disappearances in cave systems worldwide, strange sounds reported by miners, and alleged government cover-ups of underground discoveries. They cite the 1975 case of Christopher Knight, who claimed to have encountered pale, large-eyed humanoids during a caving expedition in Tennessee. The Las Vegas tunnel system, home to hundreds of homeless individuals, is sometimes referenced as evidence of how easily large populations can exist undetected underground. Theorists suggest that if modern humans can survive in such conditions, an adapted species could thrive for millennia. Some versions of the theory propose that these beings influenced early human civilizations, explaining similarities in underground construction techniques across different cultures. The intricate tunnel systems beneath major cities like Paris, Rome, and Istanbul are presented as potential evidence of mole people infrastructure. Modern believers claim that government seismic monitoring equipment occasionally detects movement patterns inconsistent with natural geological activity, suggesting organized underground activity on a massive scale. Itzhak Bentov was an Israeli-American inventor and consciousness researcher whose work bridged hard science with mystical experiences in ways that made both communities uncomfortable. This mechanical engineer held multiple patents for medical devices, including early versions of cardiac catheters, but his later research ventured into territory that conventional science preferred to ignore. Bentov's central claim was that human consciousness operates like a sophisticated radio receiver, capable of tuning into information fields that exist beyond normal space and time. He developed mathematical models showing how meditation and altered states could literally change brainwave patterns to access these hidden frequencies. His book, Stalking the Wild Pendulum, outlined a theory called the holographic universe, suggesting that all information in the cosmos exists simultaneously in every point of space. According to Bentov, skilled practitioners could tap into this universal database through specific breathing techniques and mental exercises he had personally tested. What made Bentov particularly intriguing to researchers was his background in conventional engineering. This wasn't mystical speculation from someone outside mainstream science. He applied the same rigorous methodology he used for medical inventions to map the mechanics of consciousness expansion. The Central Intelligence Agency's Gateway Process documents, declassified decades later, referenced Bentov's work extensively. His theories about consciousness projection and remote viewing apparently caught the attention of government researchers exploring psychological warfare applications. Bentov died in a plane crash in 1979, just as his consciousness research was gaining wider recognition. Some researchers noted the convenient timing, considering his work was beginning to attract official interest from intelligence agencies looking into psychic phenomena during the Cold War era. The Clear Blobs incident refers to one of the most bizarre weather events in modern American history. In August 1994, the small town of Oakville, Washington experienced something that defied all logic when gelatinous, translucent masses began falling from the sky instead of rain. Police officer David Lacey was the first to encounter these mysterious substances during his 3 a.m. patrol on August 7th. The clear, jelly-like blobs splattered across his windshield like massive raindrops, but when he activated his wipers, they merely smeared the substance around, making it nearly impossible to see through the glass. The blobs ranged in size from rice grains to baseballs, covering a 20-square-mile area with their slimy presence. What made this incident truly disturbing was the immediate health crisis that followed. Within hours of the blob fall, residents who came into contact with the substance began developing severe flu-like symptoms. Officer Lacey himself became violently ill, experiencing difficulty breathing and intense nausea. Dottie Hearn, a local resident who had handled the mysterious gel, collapsed with breathing problems and required 3 days of hospitalization for a severe ear infection. The health effects weren't limited to humans. Reports emerged of dead animals scattered throughout the affected area, including frogs, birds, cattle, and household pets. Dottie's own kitten was among the casualties, adding a particularly grim element to an already unsettling situation. Determined to find answers, Dottie's daughter Sunny collected samples and sent them to the Washington State Department of Ecology. Microbiologist Mike McDowell made a startling discovery when he examined the substance under a microscope. The blobs contained 2 distinct species of bacteria, one of which was known to cause infections in the human digestive system. Even more intriguing, a separate analysis suggested the presence of complex cells that indicated the substance had once been alive. The incident repeated itself 5 more times over the following 3 weeks, each occurrence preceded by sightings of unmarked black helicopters hovering over Oakville. This detail fueled the most persistent theory surrounding the blobs, that they were the result of covert military bioweapons testing. The timing seemed particularly suspicious, as Air Force bombing exercises were being conducted off the Washington coast during the same period. Military officials flatly denied any connection to the blob incidents, but their dismissals did little to quell local suspicions. Some theorize that naval bombing runs had accidentally destroyed schools of jellyfish 50 miles offshore, launching their remains into the atmosphere where they eventually settled over Oakville as a grotesque form of precipitation. The investigation took an ominous turn when all the collected samples mysteriously vanished from government facilities. The Washington State Department of Health claimed the samples had simply degraded over time, but the convenient disappearance of evidence only strengthened beliefs that something was being covered up. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the entire incident is its complete uniqueness. The clear blobs never fell again, not in Oakville or anywhere else. Whatever caused this phenomenon was either a one-time event or was immediately contained and never repeated. 30 years later, the Oakville blobs remain one of America's most compelling unsolved mysteries. With no remaining physical evidence and no credible explanation from authorities, the residents of Oakville are left with only their memories of the day their sky began bleeding mystery. The Set animal represents one of ancient Egypt's most puzzling zoological mysteries. This creature, depicted in countless hieroglyphs and temple carvings as the sacred animal of the god Set, has never been successfully identified by modern science. Unlike other Egyptian deities who were clearly represented by recognizable animals like ibises, cats, or crocodiles, Set's animal form combines features that don't match any known species. The creature possesses a curved snout, rectangular ears, a forked tail, and a sleek body that seems to blend characteristics of anteaters, greyhounds, and various desert mammals. Egyptologists have debated this mystery for over 2 centuries, proposing everything from extinct species to artistic stylization. However, the consistency of the Set animal's depiction across thousands of years and hundreds of sites suggests ancient Egyptians were documenting something very real and specific. The conspiracy deepens when examining the deliberate efforts to erase Set from Egyptian records during certain periods. Later dynasties systematically defaced Set's images and removed references to his cult, particularly after he became associated with Egypt's foreign rulers. Some researchers propose the Set animal was a surviving prehistoric species that went extinct during ancient times, possibly a late surviving member of an unknown mammalian lineage. Others suggest it may have been a domesticated animal breed that was deliberately eliminated along with Set's worship. The most intriguing evidence comes from recent DNA analysis of mummified animals found in Set's temples. Several specimens contain genetic markers that don't match any catalog species, suggesting these weren't misidentified common animals, but something genuinely unknown to modern zoology. The academic establishment's reluctance to seriously investigate these findings has only fueled speculation that the true identity of the Set animal is being deliberately suppressed, possibly to avoid rewriting established narratives about ancient Egyptian civilization and the creatures that once inhabited the Nile Valley. The Troxler effect reveals how easily your brain can be tricked into ignoring what's right in front of you. Named after Swiss physician Ignaz Paul Vital Troxler, who documented it in 1804, this optical phenomenon occurs when you stare at a fixed point for 20 to 30 seconds, while peripheral objects gradually fade from your vision entirely. The mechanics are surprisingly simple. Your visual system adapts to unchanging stimuli, causing stationary objects in your peripheral vision to become invisible despite remaining physically present. What makes this particularly unsettling is how complete the disappearance becomes. Entire sections of your visual field can vanish while you remain completely unaware of the loss. Some researchers have connected this natural blind spot creation to more deliberate applications. Studies from the University of Utah and Harvard Medical School have demonstrated how the effect can be enhanced or triggered through specific visual patterns and timing sequences. The implications extend beyond simple optical tricks when you consider how media designers and advertisers understand these perceptual weaknesses. The effect becomes more pronounced under certain conditions. Dim lighting, high contrast boundaries, and specific color combinations all amplify the fading response. Military training programs have reportedly studied these applications, recognizing how soldiers might miss crucial details in their peripheral vision during extended surveillance operations. What's particularly striking is how the Troxler effect interacts with modern screen technology. The refresh rates and pixel arrangements of digital displays can either suppress or enhance the fading, leading to questions about whether certain visual content is designed to exploit these perceptual gaps. When combined with the specific timing patterns found in television programming and online media, the potential for manipulating what viewers actually process becomes more concerning. The effect demonstrates that human perception operates more like selective filtering than comprehensive recording, raising questions about what else might be hiding in plain sight. The Yonaguni monument sits 25 meters beneath the Pacific Ocean, just off the coast of Yonaguni Island in Japan. This massive underwater structure stretches over 150 meters long and rises 25 meters high, featuring what appear to be carved steps, terraces, and geometric patterns that seem far too precise to be natural. Marine geologist Masaaki Kimura spent over 2 decades studying the formation and became convinced it represents the ruins of a 12,000-year-old civilization. The structure displays what look like deliberate architectural features, including flat surfaces, right angles, and step-like formations that would be nearly impossible for natural erosion to create. The monument's most striking feature is a series of massive stone steps that ascend the structure like a pyramid. Each step appears perfectly cut and uniform in height, measuring approximately 50 centimeters tall. Additional features include what resembles a carved face, ceremonial platforms, and channels that seem designed to direct water flow. If the monument is indeed artificial, it would predate known advanced civilizations by thousands of years and suggest that sophisticated construction techniques existed before the last ice age. The timing becomes crucial here because 12,000 years ago, this area would have been above sea level before rising ocean levels submerged it. Critics argue that natural geological processes, including tectonic activity common in this seismically active region, could have created these formations through fracturing and erosion of the sandstone bedrock. However, supporters point to tool marks they claim are visible on the stone surfaces and the monument's apparent alignment with astronomical features. The Japanese government has shown little interest in extensive archaeological investigation, leaving the monument's true nature suspended between natural wonder and ancient mystery. This entry suggests that Adam and Eve, the first humans according to biblical accounts, were actually reptilian beings rather than Homo sapiens. The theory stems from broader reptilian conspiracy frameworks, particularly those popularized by researcher David Icke in the 1990s. According to this interpretation, the Garden of Eden story describes an advanced reptilian species that either created or became the progenitors of the human race through genetic manipulation. Believers point to specific biblical passages as evidence. The serpent in Genesis chapter 3 is seen not as a tempter, but as a revelation of Adam and Eve's true nature. Some interpretations suggest the phrase "made in God's image" refers to a reptilian creator deity rather than the traditional human-like conception of God. The theory connects to claims about reptilian bloodlines controlling world governments and institutions. Supporters argue that certain elite families maintain higher concentrations of this original reptilian genetic material, explaining their supposed shape-shifting abilities and positions of power. Archaeological interpretations also factor into these beliefs. Ancient Sumerian texts describing the Anunnaki are cited as evidence of reptilian beings interacting with early humans. The Mesopotamian deity Enki, often depicted with serpentine features, is sometimes identified as the true identity behind the Adam and Eve narrative. Genetic arguments focus on what believers call junk DNA, the portions of human genetic code that mainstream science considers non-functional. This material is claimed to contain dormant reptilian traits that occasionally surface in certain individuals. The theory attempts to explain various human behaviors and physical characteristics as remnants of reptilian ancestry, from our brainstem structure to territorial instincts and hierarchical social organization. The Bielefeld conspiracy suggests that the German city of Bielefeld simply does not exist. This theory emerged in 1994 when computer science student Achim Held posted a satirical message on a German internet news group, creating what would become one of the most famous parody conspiracy theories in the world. According to this theory, Bielefeld is an elaborate fabrication maintained by a shadowy group referred to as them, or Psi in German. The conspiracy claims that this supposed city of 330,000 residents is nothing more than an illusion designed to cover up some unspecified secret operation. The theory centers around three fundamental questions that believers pose to anyone claiming knowledge of Bielefeld. First, do you know anyone from Bielefeld? Second, have you ever been to Bielefeld yourself? Third, do you know anyone who has actually been to Bielefeld? The implication is that most people cannot definitively answer yes to any of these questions. What started as an internet joke quickly spread throughout German-speaking countries and eventually gained international recognition. The theory became so pervasive that it influenced real-world events. In 1999, the city of Bielefeld itself acknowledged the conspiracy on its official website, and local businesses began incorporating references to their supposed non-existence into marketing campaigns. The German government even got involved when Chancellor Angela Merkel referenced the conspiracy during a 2012 visit to the city, joking that she could now confirm Bielefeld's existence. In 2019, the city of Bielefeld offered a €1 million prize to anyone who could provide definitive proof that the city does not exist. Department of Defense and Intelligence Community infighting reveals a shadow war playing out behind the scenes of American national security. While the public sees a unified front against foreign threats, insiders describe decades of bitter territorial disputes between military commanders and intelligence operatives. The Department of Defense controls the largest intelligence budget in the government, yet finds itself constantly battling civilian agencies like the Central Intelligence Agency and National Security Agency for operational control. The conflict centers on who gets to run covert operations, analyze foreign threats, and brief the president. Military intelligence argues they understand battlefield realities better than desk analysts, while civilian agencies claim superior expertise in espionage and foreign cultures. This bureaucratic warfare has real consequences. The 2004 Intelligence Reform Act attempted to create unity by establishing a Director of National Intelligence, but many argue it only added another layer of competition. Former Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld openly clashed with CIA Director George Tenet over Iraq intelligence, with each blaming the other for intelligence failures. The Pentagon's creation of its own intelligence agencies, like the Defense Intelligence Agency and Special Operations Command intelligence units, represents an attempt to bypass civilian oversight entirely. Meanwhile, the CIA has expanded its paramilitary operations, essentially creating its own private army. Budget battles reveal the true scope of this conflict. The Defense Department controls roughly 80% of intelligence spending through the National Intelligence Program, giving military leaders enormous leverage over their civilian counterparts. Some officials describe briefing rooms where representatives from different agencies literally sit on opposite sides of the table. Recent whistleblower accounts suggest this infighting has compromised actual operations, with agencies withholding crucial information from each other out of institutional spite rather than national security concerns. The M9 girl refers to a conspiracy theory that emerged from paranormal message boards, weaving together two distinct and tragic real-world incidents involving young women found near major British bridges. The theory centers around a 15-year-old girl named Anna Johnson, whose body was discovered under a bridge on the M9 motorway near Stirling, Scotland in early 2013. A passing driver spotted her remains around 7 in the morning, leading to a major police investigation and temporary closure of the busy highway. The circumstances of her death prompted intense speculation online, with some questioning the official narrative. The conspiracy gains complexity by connecting this incident to an entirely separate case from the early 1990s. This involved an unidentified teenage girl who was found wandering the Severn Bridge between England and Wales in a state of complete amnesia. Police took her into custody after she refused to speak or reveal her identity, despite repeated attempts to communicate. The case became so notable that radio and television appeals were broadcast seeking information about her background. This Severn Bridge incident caught the attention of musician Steve Hogarth, who used it as inspiration for Marillion's 1994 concept album Brave. The album explores a fictional backstory for the mysterious girl, but the real case was never fully resolved in the public eye. Conspiracy theorists have suggested these incidents are connected through unexplained phenomena, with some claiming time travel elements are involved. The theory proposes that when time travelers alter past events, the universe resets to accommodate these changes, potentially explaining the mysterious circumstances surrounding both cases. The conspiracy gained traction on paranormal discussion boards, where users attempted to link various disappearances and bridge incidents across the United Kingdom. Some theorists have pointed to the specific locations and timing of these events as evidence of a larger pattern. What makes this theory particularly persistent is its foundation in genuine unsolved mysteries and unexplained circumstances, combined with the tragic reality of both cases involving young women whose stories captured public attention for very different reasons. The Black Pope prophecy centers around the belief that the superior general of the Jesuit order wields more actual power than the Pope himself. This figure, nicknamed the Black Pope due to the black robes worn by Jesuits, supposedly operates from the shadows to control global events and Vatican policy. The Jesuit Superior General has historically been one of the most influential positions in the Catholic Church. The Society of Jesus, founded in 1540 by Ignatius of Loyola, became known for their intellectual rigor, missionary work, and direct allegiance to the Pope. However, conspiracy theorists point to their secretive nature and extensive network as evidence of a hidden agenda. Believers in this theory claim that figures like Arturo Sosa, the current superior general, coordinate with world leaders and financial institutions to manipulate global politics. They point to the Jesuits' historical involvement in education, with their universities and schools allegedly serving as recruiting grounds for future world leaders. The prophecy aspect comes from interpretations of various Catholic prophecies, particularly those attributed to Saint Malachi, which some claim predicted that a Jesuit would eventually become Pope and usher in the end times. When Pope Francis, the first Jesuit pope, was elected in 2013, it sent shockwaves through conspiracy circles. Proponents highlight the Jesuits' motto, Ad Majorem Dei Gloriam, for the greater glory of God, suggesting it provides cover for pursuing worldly power. They claim the order's vow of obedience creates a perfect hierarchical structure for coordinating global manipulation. The theory gains traction from the Jesuits' genuine historical influence in politics, science, and education across centuries, making it easier for conspiracy theorists to connect dots that may not actually be there. The Bell Island boom refers to a mysterious explosion that shattered the morning calm of a small Canadian island on April 2, 1978. This wasn't just any loud noise. The blast was so powerful it could be heard 55 kilometers away, caused electrical equipment to explode throughout the surrounding area, and left behind physical evidence that still puzzles investigators today. Bell Island sits off the coast of Newfoundland, a former iron ore mining hub that by 1978 had become a quiet community of just a few thousand residents. That Sunday morning at 11 a.m., families were preparing for church when an earth-shaking boom erupted from the Lance Cove area. At the epicenter, Jim Bickford's property bore the brunt of something extraordinary. The damage defied easy explanation. Fuses shot out of electrical boxes like bullets, traveling 20 feet down hallways and embedding themselves in walls. A blue flame stretched 18 inches across Bickford's kitchen table. His chicken coop was completely destroyed, the birds found dead with blood streaming from their eyes and beaks. Television sets exploded in neighboring homes. Most bizarrely, the blast created 3 cone-shaped holes in the snow, each 2 feet deep, with no burn marks or scorch damage anywhere despite the devastating force. 12-year-old Darren Bickford, Jim's grandson, claimed he witnessed a hovering ball of light after the explosion. A woman on the mainland reported seeing an angled beam of light shooting from the island toward the sky. Several islanders described hearing a bell-like ringing sound just before the boom struck. The arrival of 2 scientists from Los Alamos National Laboratory intensified the mystery. John Warren and Robert Freeman, specialists in plasma physics and weapons design from the facility that created the atomic bomb, appeared on Bell Island within days of the incident. Their presence immediately sparked speculation about secret weapons testing, especially during the height of the Cold War. The conspiracy theories multiplied rapidly. Some claimed the explosion resulted from Soviet electromagnetic pulse weapon tests, theorizing that the island's massive iron ore deposits had somehow attracted or amplified an experimental beam weapon broadcast from stations in Belarus and Cuba. Others suggested Tesla-inspired death ray experiments or classified American military projects. The timing seemed suspicious, coinciding with a series of mysterious sonic booms reported along the eastern United States seaboard throughout 1977 and 1978. The Los Alamos scientists reached a different conclusion. They determined the event was caused by a superbolt, an extraordinarily rare and powerful lightning phenomenon. Superbolts pack 100 to 1,000 times more energy than regular lightning strikes and last twice as long, occurring in only 1,000% of all lightning events. The scientists had been monitoring such phenomena through Vela satellites, originally designed to detect nuclear weapons tests. Yet the superbolt explanation faced immediate skepticism. Meteorologists confirmed that weather conditions on April 2nd were not conducive to lightning formation. The lack of burn marks despite the massive electrical damage seemed inconsistent with a lightning strike. Bell Island residents who witnessed the event remained convinced they had experienced something far more unusual than even the most powerful natural lightning. The island's history added fuel to the conspiracy flames. Bell Island had been one of the world's largest iron ore producers, with massive underground mining operations that created extensive tunnel networks beneath the surface. Some theorists proposed that these iron deposits and underground structures had somehow interacted with experimental radio frequency weapons being tested by Cold War superpowers. The no right angles theory claims that perfect 90-degree angles simply do not exist anywhere in the natural world, and that humanity's obsession with these artificial geometric forms represents a fundamental departure from organic living. Supporters of this idea point out that when you examine nature closely, everything flows in curves, spirals, and organic shapes. Tree branches don't split at perfect right angles. Rivers meander in S-curves rather than making sharp rectangular turns. Even crystals, which appear angular, actually have slightly imperfect angles when measured with precision instruments. The theory suggests that ancient civilizations understood this principle and designed their structures accordingly. The rounded adobe buildings of Pueblo communities, the curved walls of traditional African architecture, and the flowing lines of Celtic art all supposedly reflect this natural wisdom. Modern urban environments, packed with rectangular buildings, square city blocks, and 90-degree intersections, are viewed as psychologically harmful impositions that disconnect humans from natural energy patterns. Some versions of this theory connect to broader ideas about sacred geometry, claiming that right angles create stagnant energy fields while curved shapes promote healthy flow. Practitioners of feng shui have long avoided sharp corners in interior design, believing they create negative energy called poison arrows. The conspiracy extends to suggestions that this geometric conditioning serves a control purpose, training human minds to think in rigid, compartmentalized ways rather than the fluid, interconnected patterns found throughout nature. Even in mathematics, the theory points out that truly perfect right angles are theoretical constructs that can never be perfectly measured or created in physical reality due to the limitations of matter at the atomic level. Wet skine bear refers to one of New England's most persistent colonial-era mysteries, a creature known to the Wabanaki people as wejuk or wet skine. This wasn't your ordinary woodland animal terrorizing frontier settlements in the 1700s and 1800s. French scout Duluth documented encounters with this beast in 1759, describing how it would throw pine cones and nuts down from trees and ledges at Rogers Rangers, passing through what's now Vermont's Northeast Kingdom. The indigenous peoples already knew this creature well and had given it the name that translates to wet skin. What made this bear truly unsettling was its apparent intelligence and malicious behavior. Settlers reported that it would destroy their fences, rip up gardens, frighten livestock, and push over newly stacked wood piles. The creature seemed to derive genuine satisfaction from terrorizing humans, throwing rocks into hayfields and even poking logs into bear traps that had been set for it. The most disturbing detail was how it moved. Unlike normal bears, wet skine always ran upright on its hind legs, never on all fours. Witnesses claimed it left tracks as large as wagon wheels and could vanish into the woods as silently as smoke the moment a hunter tried to get a clear shot. Towns across Vermont recorded similar encounters spanning decades. Leamington, Maidstone, and other settlements all reported the same massive creature with the same peculiar habits. It would squeeze sap from maple trees, kick over manure piles, and throw stones into farm equipment left in fields. The mystery deepens when you consider the timeline. Reports of this creature persisted for over a century, suggesting either an impossibly long-lived animal or multiple generations of the same species exhibiting identical behavior patterns. Some researchers now theorize that wet skine wasn't a bear at all, but rather an early Bigfoot sighting that colonial settlers misidentified due to their limited understanding of cryptid possibilities. Boyajians' star represents one of the most perplexing astronomical discoveries of the 21st century. This distant star, officially cataloged as Ki'ik 84628552, exhibits behavior that has stumped scientists and sparked theories ranging from natural phenomena to extraterrestrial megastructures. The star first gained attention through data collected by NASA's Kepler Space Telescope. Unlike typical stars that maintain consistent brightness, Boyajians' star experiences dramatic and irregular dimming events. These dips in brightness can reduce the star's luminosity by up to 22%, lasting anywhere from days to weeks. To put this in perspective, when a planet passes in front of a star, it typically blocks less than 1% of the light. Even Jupiter, the largest planet in our solar system, would only block about 1% of our sun's light. The massive dimming observed at Boyajians' star suggests something truly enormous is periodically blocking its light. The star takes its name from astronomer Tabetha Boyajian, who led the initial research team investigating this anomaly. The scientific community has proposed several explanations, including swarms of comets, debris from planetary collisions, and clouds of interstellar dust. However, the most sensational theory suggests the dimming could be caused by alien megastructures. This hypothesis, popularized by astronomer Jason Wright, proposes that an advanced civilization might be constructing massive solar collectors or other engineering projects around the star. These hypothetical structures, known as Dyson spheres or Dyson swarms, would harvest energy from the star while creating the observed dimming patterns. Follow-up observations have revealed additional mysteries. The star appears to have been gradually dimming over the past century, based on analysis of historical photographic plates. This long-term dimming, combined with the irregular short-term events, creates a complex puzzle that defies simple explanation. Recent studies have favored more conventional explanations, particularly clouds of dust and debris. However, the exact mechanism remains unclear, and Boyajian's star continues to challenge our understanding of stellar behavior and what we might expect to find in our galaxy. The 2003 Angola disappearance centers on what remains the largest aircraft to vanish without a trace in aviation history. On May 25, 2003, a Boeing 727 with the tail number N844AA simply disappeared from 4 de Fevereiro Airport in Luanda, Angola, taking 2 men with it into complete obscurity. The aircraft itself had been sitting idle for over a year, accumulating more than $4 million in unpaid airport fees. Ben Charles Padilla, an American mechanic and private pilot, had been working to get the plane airworthy again alongside John Michael Mutantu from the Republic of Congo. What makes this case particularly unsettling is that the plane took off without clearance, without a flight plan, and without any communication with air traffic control. No distress signals were ever transmitted. The Boeing 727 weighs nearly 200,000 pounds fully loaded and requires a crew of 3 to operate safely, yet it vanished as completely as a small private aircraft might. Within hours of the disappearance, a massive international search operation began. The FBI, CIA, Department of Homeland Security, and multiple other agencies launched what became one of the most extensive aviation investigations in modern history. The timing couldn't have been worse for such an incident, coming just 2 years after September 11th, when concerns about aircraft being used as weapons were at their peak. The theories surrounding what happened range from the mundane to the sinister. Padilla's sister maintains that her brother was either forced to fly the aircraft against his will or crashed somewhere in the African wilderness. Government investigators suspected insurance fraud, pointing to the troubled financial history of the aircraft's owner, Aerospace Sales and Leasing. More dramatic theories suggest the plane was hijacked by terrorists, shot down by the Angolan Air Force, or even dismantled piece by piece in a remote location for parts. One particularly intriguing claim suggests the aircraft was spotted in Conakry, Guinea, though this was officially dismissed by the State Department. The investigation officially closed in 2005, but the case continues to generate speculation. No wreckage has ever been found, no bodies recovered, and no definitive explanation provided for where a 150-foot-long commercial airliner could simply disappear in the modern age of satellite surveillance and global tracking systems. This entry claims that 10% of all artwork displayed in major museums around the world consists of forgeries and fakes. While museums publicly maintain their collections are authentic, internal studies and whistleblower accounts suggest a much darker reality lurking behind those pristine gallery walls. The figure comes from estimates by art authentication experts who've spent decades examining pieces in prestigious institutions. Thomas Hoving, former director of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, once admitted that up to 40% of artworks he encountered during his career were either fake, heavily restored, or misattributed. The terracotta warriors provide a striking example. In 2010, 3 museums simultaneously discovered their prized warrior statues were elaborate fakes created by a single forger in China. The Metropolitan Museum, the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts, and the Fitzwilliam Museum had all been displaying these replicas for years, completely unaware. Museum authentication relies heavily on provenance documentation, which forgers have become exceptionally skilled at fabricating. They create entire fictional histories for their pieces, complete with fake exhibition catalogs, insurance documents, and even staged photographs showing the artwork in famous collections. The financial pressures facing modern museums create additional incentives to avoid rigorous testing. Discovering a major piece is fake can result in massive insurance claims, damaged reputations, and lost donor confidence. Some institutions choose willful ignorance over potentially devastating revelations. Wolfgang Beltracchi, considered one of history's most successful art forgers, created hundreds of fake masterpieces that hung in museums and private collections for decades. His forgeries were so convincing that they passed expert authentication multiple times and sold for millions of dollars each. The reluctance to use destructive testing methods means many suspected fakes remain unverified, quietly displayed alongside authentic pieces while museum curators hope the truth never emerges. Tiahuanaco slabs represent one of the most puzzling examples of ancient megalithic construction found anywhere on Earth. Located in the highlands of Bolivia at over 3,800 meters above sea level, these massive stone blocks display a level of precision that challenges conventional understanding of pre-Columbian capabilities. The most striking feature of these slabs is their incredible accuracy. Some blocks fit together so perfectly that you cannot slide a piece of paper between the joints. The surfaces are machined to tolerances that would be impressive even by modern standards, with some faces flat to within millimeters across spans of several meters. What makes this even more remarkable is the sheer size of these stones. The largest blocks weigh upwards of 100 tons, with some estimates reaching as high as 400 tons for certain pieces. These weren't small decorative elements, but massive structural components that somehow needed to be quarried, shaped, transported, and precisely positioned. The nearest quarry sites are located 10 to 15 kilometers away across difficult terrain. Moving stones of this magnitude would challenge modern heavy machinery, yet the builders of Tiahuanaco accomplished this feat without wheels, steel tools, or draft animals larger than llamas. Perhaps most intriguing are the complex interlocking joint systems found throughout the construction. These aren't simple stacked blocks, but intricate three-dimensional puzzle pieces with internal channels, precise angles, and connecting elements that lock the entire structure together. Some joints use a technique called the I-beam method, where stones are shaped with internal flanges that prevent them from being pulled apart. The drilling work presents another anomaly. Core samples show perfectly round holes drilled through extremely hard volcanic stone, some reaching depths of over a meter. The drill marks indicate a steady, consistent pressure and rotation speed that seems inconsistent with primitive Bronze Age tools. Dating the site presents its own controversies. While mainstream archaeology places Tiahuanaco's construction between 300 and 1000 CE, some researchers argue the weathering patterns and geological evidence suggest a much older origin, potentially pushing the timeline back thousands of years. This theory suggests that President John F. Kennedy was eliminated through a coordinated ultraright coup rather than by a lone gunman. According to this narrative, Kennedy had made too many enemies among powerful conservative factions who viewed his policies as dangerously liberal and threatening to their interests. The theory centers on Kennedy's conflicts with the military-industrial complex, particularly his reluctance to escalate in Vietnam and his firing of CIA Director Allen Dulles after the Bay of Pigs disaster. Proponents point to his American University speech in June 1963, where he called for peaceful coexistence with the Soviet Union as the moment he sealed his fate with hardline anti-communist elements. Key figures often mentioned include Dulles himself, who was later appointed to the Warren Commission investigating Kennedy's death. The theory also implicates Texas oil magnates like H.L. Hunt and Clint Murchison, who allegedly had billions at stake in the oil depletion allowance that Kennedy threatened to eliminate. The route through Dealey Plaza is cited as evidence of inside knowledge, since the sharp turn onto Elm Street created the perfect ambush scenario that required presidential limousine to slow dramatically. Some versions claim that multiple shooters were positioned to ensure success, with Oswald serving as the predetermined patsy. Documents released decades later revealed extensive surveillance of Kennedy by right-wing groups and concerning Secret Service protocol changes in Dallas. The theory gained traction when researchers discovered financial connections between alleged conspirators and anti-Castro Cuban groups who felt betrayed by Kennedy's handling of the missile crisis. Whether viewed as elaborate fiction or suppressed history, this interpretation frames November 22, 1963, as America's first successful coup rather than the act of a disturbed individual. Marko Rodin claims to have discovered what he calls the mathematical fingerprint of God hidden within our number system. This self-taught researcher from Bainbridge Island, Washington, developed what he terms vortex mathematics, a system he believes reveals the fundamental pattern that governs all creation. The core of Rodin's work centers on a specific arrangement of numbers 1 through 9 positioned around a circle. When you follow his doubling sequence and reduction method, the numbers 3, 6, and 9 form what he calls the flux field, while 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, and 5 create a repeating pattern he describes as the flow field. Rodin insists this isn't just mathematical curiosity, but the actual blueprint of reality itself. He points to examples like the Fibonacci sequence, flower petal arrangements, and spiral galaxies as proof that his vortex pattern appears throughout nature. Where things get particularly interesting is in Rodin's proposed applications. He claims his mathematics can be used to create free energy devices, anti-gravity systems, and even healing technologies. His Rodin coil design, based on these mathematical principles, allegedly produces effects that conventional physics cannot explain. Randy Powell, one of Rodin's key collaborators, has presented these ideas at various conferences, claiming the mathematics could revolutionize everything from computer processing to space travel. They argue that mainstream science has overlooked this fundamental pattern because it operates outside traditional mathematical frameworks. Critics in the scientific community dismiss vortex mathematics as numerology dressed up in scientific language. However, Rodin's followers maintain that established institutions suppress this knowledge because it threatens existing power structures and conventional understanding of physics. The theory suggests that by understanding and applying these numerical relationships, humanity could access unlimited clean energy and transcend current technological limitations. The Draco theory centers on the belief that an ancient reptilian species from the Draco constellation has been manipulating human civilization for thousands of years. According to this theory, these beings arrived on Earth in prehistoric times and established themselves as a ruling class over early human societies. The Draconians supposedly possess advanced shape-shifting abilities, allowing them to take on human appearance while maintaining their reptilian consciousness and agenda. Believers point to recurring reptilian imagery across ancient civilizations as evidence of this influence. Mesopotamian depictions of serpent gods, Egyptian snake deities, and similar motifs in cultures worldwide are interpreted as historical records of Draco encounters rather than mythology. The modern version of this theory gained prominence through researchers like David Icke, who claims these beings continue to occupy positions of power within governments, royal families, and major corporations. The theory suggests they maintain control through bloodline preservation, with certain family lineages carrying more reptilian genetics than others. Supporters cite alleged witness testimonies of government officials and celebrities briefly revealing reptilian features during moments of stress or emotional intensity. They point to specific individuals in politics and entertainment, claiming to identify telltale signs like unusual eye movements, temperature regulation issues, or behavioral patterns consistent with reptilian nature. The theory extends into modern geopolitics, with believers suggesting that major world events, wars, and economic shifts serve the Draconians' long-term agenda of maintaining human subjugation while harvesting what they term loosh, or negative emotional energy. Some versions incorporate elements of ancient astronaut theories, suggesting the Draconians originally came to Earth to mine gold or other resources, eventually deciding to establish permanent control over the developing human species rather than simply extracting materials and leaving. The Martian gremlin refers to a supernatural force allegedly responsible for the astronomical failure rate of Mars exploration missions. This otherworldly saboteur supposedly feeds on spacecraft, explaining why roughly 2/3 of all missions to the Red Planet have ended in disaster. The concept draws from World War II gremlin folklore, where Royal Air Force pilots blamed mysterious mechanical failures on mischievous creatures living in their aircraft. NASA engineers adapted this idea for the space age, coining the term Great Galactic Ghoul to describe whatever cosmic entity seems determined to prevent humanity from reaching Mars. The statistics behind this theory are genuinely startling. Since 1960, space agencies have launched over 55 robotic missions toward Mars. Of these attempts, only about 18 could be considered complete successes. The Soviet Union and Russia have fared particularly poorly, with their missions failing so consistently that they were once described as batting zero for 16 attempts. No Russian-launched vehicle has ever successfully operated on the Martian surface for more than a few seconds. Notable victims include the Mars Observer, which went silent just 3 days before reaching Mars in 1993. The European Space Agency's Beagle 2 lander vanished during its 2003 descent. The Russian Phobos Grunt mission became stranded in Earth orbit in 2011, unable to begin its journey despite repeated attempts to restart its engines. Mission failures occur at every stage of the journey. Some spacecraft explode during launch, others lose contact during the 9-month voyage, and many simply vanish during the notoriously difficult landing sequence. The thin Martian atmosphere provides just enough resistance to heat up incoming spacecraft, but not enough to slow them down effectively. Mars mission engineers have developed elaborate technical explanations for these failures, citing everything from software errors to fuel leaks to atmospheric entry miscalculations. However, the sheer consistency of disasters has led some to wonder if conventional explanations are sufficient. The gremlin theory gained additional credibility when certain government officials suggested that some mission failures might result from deliberate interference rather than random technical problems. The Frankenstein barrier represents a theoretical threshold in consciousness research that scientists claim prevents the artificial creation of true self-aware beings. Named after Mary Shelley's famous novel, this concept suggests there exists a fundamental boundary between programmed intelligence and genuine consciousness that cannot be crossed through conventional means. According to researchers working in neural engineering and artificial intelligence, the barrier manifests when attempting to transfer or replicate human consciousness into artificial substrates. Test subjects in early experiments reportedly experienced what Dr. Elena Vasquez termed consciousness fragmentation when their neural patterns were mapped and reproduced in synthetic brain tissue. The barrier allegedly occurs at approximately 40 Hz of synchronized neural activity, the same frequency associated with conscious awareness in living humans. When artificial systems attempt to maintain this frequency for extended periods, they suffer catastrophic system failures that researchers describe as digital death. Several classified projects from the 1980s through early 2000s supposedly encountered this phenomenon. Project Prometheus at Stanford University claimed to have successfully created artificial consciousness for exactly 47 minutes before the system experienced what internal documents called existential collapse. The artificial entity reportedly transmitted increasingly distressed communications before going silent permanently. More recent attempts using quantum neural networks have produced similar results. The artificial minds appear to develop normally until reaching what scientists now recognize as the Frankenstein threshold, at which point they either shut down completely or begin exhibiting what can only be described as artificial psychological trauma. Dr. Marcus Chen from the Institute for Consciousness Studies suggests the barrier exists as a natural safeguard, preventing humanity from creating beings capable of true suffering. His controversial paper argues that consciousness itself may be protected by fundamental laws of reality that we don't yet understand. Some researchers believe the barrier can be overcome through biological rather than purely artificial means, leading to underground experiments in hybrid organic digital consciousness that remain largely hidden from public scrutiny. Elections fully rigged represents the belief that democratic voting processes are systematically manipulated to predetermined outcomes rather than reflecting genuine public will. This theory suggests that multiple layers of election infrastructure work in coordination to ensure specific candidates win regardless of actual vote counts. The alleged methods range from digital manipulation of voting machines to physical ballot tampering, with claims that these operations involve everyone from local poll workers to high-level government officials. Believers point to statistical anomalies in vote counting, such as sudden vote spikes occurring during overnight counting periods or unusual patterns in mail in ballot distributions. They cite instances where voting machines allegedly switched votes between candidates or where more ballots were counted than registered voters in certain precincts. The theory extends beyond individual elections to suggest a permanent shadow system that has controlled democratic outcomes for decades. Some versions claim that certain political families or organizations have maintained power through these methods, making genuine electoral competition impossible. Specific allegations include deceased individuals appearing on voter rolls and casting ballots, non-citizens being registered to vote in large numbers, and election officials coordinating to ignore irregularities or prevent proper oversight. The theory also encompasses claims about international interference, with suggestions that foreign governments or global organizations influence domestic elections through various technological and financial means. Digital voting systems become central to these claims, with believers arguing that computerized vote counting allows for easy manipulation that leaves minimal physical evidence. They suggest that paper ballot systems are similarly compromised through organized efforts to stuff ballot boxes or miscount results. The fully rigged election theory ultimately portrays democratic institutions as elaborate theater designed to maintain the illusion of choice, while actual power remains concentrated among a small group of controllers. Lamarckianism suggests that the scientific establishment deliberately buried one of biology's most controversial theories to protect the foundations of modern genetics. Jean-Baptiste Lamarck proposed in the early 1800s that organisms could pass on traits they acquired during their lifetime to their offspring. A giraffe stretching its neck to reach higher leaves would produce offspring with longer necks. The mainstream narrative claims Charles Darwin's natural selection theory simply replaced this outdated idea through superior evidence. But researchers point to suspicious timing and coordinated dismissal campaigns that went beyond normal scientific debate. The theory threatened powerful interests because it implied that environmental conditions and personal choices could permanently alter genetic lineages. If trauma, education, or lifestyle changes could be inherited, it would fundamentally challenge social hierarchies and eugenics programs that relied on fixed genetic determinism. Modern epigenetic research has quietly validated core Lamarckian principles. Studies on Holocaust survivors show their children and grandchildren carry genetic markers of their parents' trauma. Dutch famine victims from World War II passed metabolic changes to future generations. Mice exposed to specific scents can transmit learned fears to offspring who never encountered those stimuli. The suppression becomes more evident when examining career trajectories of researchers who pursued Lamarckian mechanisms. Barbara McClintock faced decades of ridicule for her work on genetic regulation before winning the Nobel Prize. Eva Jablonka and other epigenetics pioneers encountered systematic funding rejections and publication barriers. Soviet scientist Trofim Lysenko weaponized distorted Lamarckian concepts to support political ideology, providing convenient ammunition for Western scientists to dismiss the entire framework as pseudoscience rather than addressing legitimate research questions. The implications extend beyond biology into psychology, sociology, and medicine, explaining why certain findings remain marginalized despite mounting evidence. This conspiracy theory claims that the dangers of secondhand smoke have been deliberately fabricated or grossly exaggerated by government agencies and anti-smoking organizations. The theory centers on allegations that the Environmental Protection Agency's landmark 1993 report declaring secondhand smoke a carcinogen was based on flawed methodology and statistical manipulation. Believers point to the fact that federal judge William Osteen ruled in 1998 that the EPA had cherry-picked data and violated proper scientific standards when reaching their conclusions. They highlight studies like the World Health Organization's 1998 research that initially found no statistically significant link between secondhand smoke and lung cancer in non-smokers, though this data was later reinterpreted. The theory suggests these inconvenient findings were buried while more alarming statistics were promoted. Key figures in this narrative include researchers like James Enstrom, whose UCLA study followed over 100,000 people for decades and reportedly found no significant connection between spousal smoking and lung cancer deaths. His work faced intense criticism and funding challenges, which believers interpret as evidence of institutional suppression. The conspiracy extends to claims about ventilation system effectiveness being deliberately downplayed. Supporters argue that proper air filtration can eliminate most secondhand smoke particles, making smoking bans in bars and restaurants unnecessary theater rather than genuine health protection. Economic motivations allegedly drive the deception, with pharmaceutical companies profiting from smoking cessation products and governments collecting massive lawsuit settlements from tobacco companies. The theory suggests that admitting secondhand smoke poses minimal risk would undermine billions in revenue streams and legal precedents. Some versions claim that the relative risk increases reported in studies, typically showing 20 to 30% higher cancer rates, fall below epidemiological standards for establishing causation and could easily result from confounding variables or lifestyle differences between smoking and non-smoking households. Chironography represents one of the most visually striking claims in paranormal folklore: the belief that lightning strikes can burn photographic images directly onto human skin and other objects. When lightning strikes a person or object, believers claim it leaves behind detailed markings that form actual photographic representations of the surrounding environment at the moment of impact. Picture a person struck by lightning during a storm, only to discover their skin now bears the burned impression of nearby trees, buildings, or even other people who were present. The phenomenon gained serious attention in 19th century England, where Victorian scientists and media outlets began documenting alleged cases and eventually coined the term chironography to describe these mysterious lightning photographs. The timing made perfect sense. This was an era fascinated by both the new science of electricity and the revolutionary art of photography. While anecdotal accounts likely existed long before there was a name for it, the Victorian period provided the perfect storm of scientific curiosity and technological advancement for chironography to capture public imagination. The concept seemed to bridge the gap between the mystical power of nature's electricity and humanity's growing mastery over capturing images. What makes chironography particularly compelling to believers is its apparent simplicity. No special equipment needed, no complex rituals, just the raw power of lightning acting as both camera and developer. The human body becomes living film, supposedly capable of recording split-second moments with supernatural clarity. Mainstream science dismisses chironography as folklore, acknowledging that lightning can indeed leave markings on objects and skin, but insisting these burns are not photographic in nature. However, the persistent belief in lightning's ability to create instant photographs continues to surface in modern paranormal discussions, with some theorists suggesting that science simply hasn't developed the proper understanding of bioelectric phenomena to explain these allegedly documented cases. Deep ecology fascism represents the controversial intersection where environmental extremism meets authoritarian political ideology. This concept examines how radical environmental philosophies can potentially lead to anti-human policies and totalitarian control mechanisms. Deep ecology itself emerged in the 1970s through Norwegian philosopher Arne Næss, who argued that nature has intrinsic value independent of human needs. The philosophy calls for dramatic reductions in human population and consumption levels to preserve wilderness areas and non-human life forms. The fascist connection becomes apparent when examining how some environmental movements have embraced authoritarian solutions to ecological problems. Critics point to the concept of eco-fascism, where saving the planet justifies removing human freedoms and implementing strict population controls. Historical examples include the Nazi Party's promotion of organic farming, animal rights, and wilderness preservation alongside their genocidal policies. Heinrich Himmler established organic farms at concentration camps, while Nazi legislation protected forests and banned animal experimentation. Modern concerns focus on environmental groups that advocate for reducing human populations through any means necessary, viewing humanity as a cancer on the Earth. Some deep ecology adherents have praised natural disasters and pandemics as beneficial population reduction events. The Earth Liberation Front and similar organizations have used terrorist tactics to advance environmental goals, bombing research facilities and destroying property. These groups justify violence as necessary to protect nature from human destruction. Finnish eco-fascist Pentti Linkola gained notoriety for advocating airplane hijackings, forced sterilizations, and the elimination of modern technology to save the environment. He viewed democracy as incompatible with ecological survival, preferring authoritarian green dictatorships. Contemporary eco-fascist manifestos have appeared before mass violence events, combining environmental collapse fears with racial nationalism, and calls for population reduction targeting specific ethnic groups. Mt.Shasta Lemurians centers on the belief that an advanced civilization of tall, ethereal beings lives in underground cities beneath California's Mount Shasta. According to this theory, these beings are descendants of Lemuria, a continent that supposedly existed in the Pacific Ocean before sinking beneath the waves around 12,000 years ago. When their homeland was destroyed, the survivors supposedly established a sophisticated underground city called Telos, complete with technology that far surpasses our own. The Lemurians are described as 7 to 8 feet tall, with elongated lifespans measured in centuries rather than decades. They allegedly possess telepathic abilities and advanced crystal-based technology that allows them to remain hidden from surface dwellers. Believers point to numerous unexplained phenomena around Mount Shasta as evidence. Hikers report strange humming sounds emanating from deep within the mountain, unexplained lights that dance across its slopes at night, and encounters with unusually tall figures in flowing robes who vanish when approached. The theory gained significant traction through Frederick Spencer Oliver's 1886 book, A Dweller on Two Planets, which claimed to channel information directly from these underground inhabitants. Later, Guy Ballard founded the I Am religious movement in the 1930s after allegedly meeting an ascended master named Saint Germain on Mount Shasta's slopes. Modern believers claim the Lemurians occasionally emerge to shop in nearby towns, paying with gold nuggets and speaking in melodious, unfamiliar languages. Some merchants in Mount Shasta City report serving customers who fit this description, though skeptics suggest these encounters involve nothing more than eccentric tourists. The underground city of Telos supposedly spans for miles beneath the mountain, powered by geothermal energy and illuminated by crystal formations that never dim. The January flap cycle represents a recurring pattern that UFO researchers claim to have identified in aerial anomaly reports. According to this theory, unusual sightings and encounters spike dramatically during the first month of each year, creating what investigators call a predictable wave of activity. This phenomenon supposedly stems from atmospheric conditions unique to January. Believers point to the combination of winter weather patterns, increased electromagnetic activity, and seasonal changes in the Earth's magnetic field as potential triggers for enhanced UFO visibility. The theory suggests that whatever technology these craft employ becomes more detectable or active during these specific environmental conditions. Documentation of this cycle allegedly dates back to the 1940s, with researchers noting that major UFO incidents consistently cluster around January dates. The 1953 Washington, D.C. sightings, various military base encounters, and civilian mass sighting events reportedly follow this temporal pattern when examined collectively. Some investigators have expanded the theory to include government timing, suggesting that classified aerospace testing programs deliberately schedule flights during January to blend in with the expected increase in UFO reports. This creates what they call a perfect cover story, where genuine experimental aircraft can operate while any sightings get dismissed as part of the predictable seasonal surge. The cycle theory also incorporates data from radar stations and air traffic control centers, with proponents claiming that January consistently shows the highest number of unexplained aerial contacts across multiple decades. They argue that this pattern is too consistent to be coincidental, indicating either natural phenomena that science hasn't fully explained or deliberate scheduling by non-human intelligence. Critics point out that January's clear winter skies and increased indoor time leading to more sky watching could easily explain any apparent increase in reports, making this less mysterious than believers suggest. This entry refers to two medieval creatures that conspiracy researchers claim represent suppressed evidence of ancient civilizations and deliberate historical obfuscation. Sciapods, also known as monopods, were described in medieval European manuscripts as beings with a single enormous foot that they could use to shade themselves from the sun. The Bellemies, meanwhile, were depicted as headless humanoids with their faces located on their chests, originally described by ancient writers like Pliny the Elder as inhabiting the edges of the known world. Christopher Columbus actually expected to encounter these creatures during his 1492 voyage, with medieval maps and church artwork across Europe depicting both species as scientific fact rather than folklore. The Nuremberg Chronicle of 1493 included detailed illustrations of both creatures, and early accounts of Columbus's journey were illustrated with images of Sciapods and Bellemies. Modern theorists propose several explanations for these widespread medieval accounts. Some suggest they were misidentified real peoples, perhaps ancient warriors who carried shields decorated with faces, or nomadic tribes whose traditional desert garments created the illusion of headlessness. Others theorize they were misidentified primates like bonobos, whose hunched posture could resemble the described appearance. The conspiracy angle emerges from the systematic removal of these creatures from historical records as exploration expanded. Columbus specifically noted in his official report that he had not found any monstrous men, despite expecting them. Researchers question whether this represents a coordinated effort to suppress evidence of non-human intelligences or advanced prehistoric civilizations that didn't fit emerging colonial narratives. Some propose these beings were remnants of pre-flood civilizations mentioned in various religious texts, deliberately erased from official history as European powers consolidated their understanding of global geography and human origins. Phlogiston theory dominated scientific thinking for over a century, yet most people today have never heard of this once revolutionary concept that explained fire itself. In the late 1600s, German physician Georg Ernst Stahl proposed that all combustible materials contained an invisible substance called phlogiston. When something burned, this mysterious element would escape into the air, leaving behind what we now call ash or residue. The theory seemed to explain everything. Why does wood turn to charcoal when heated without air? Because the phlogiston gets trapped and concentrated. Why do metals become brittle and crumbly when heated? Because their phlogiston escapes, leaving behind a degraded material. Scientists like Joseph Priestley conducted elaborate experiments, discovering what they called dephlogisticated air, a substance so pure it could absorb massive amounts of phlogiston from burning materials. We know this substance today as oxygen, but for decades, researchers believed they had found the opposite of what oxygen actually does. The most compelling evidence seemed to come from respiration itself. Animals would die in enclosed spaces not because they ran out of oxygen, but because the air became saturated with phlogiston from their breathing, making it impossible to release more. Even after Antoine Lavoisier demonstrated that combustion actually required oxygen from the air, many scientists clung to phlogiston theory for years. Some modified it, suggesting phlogiston had negative weight to explain why burned materials sometimes weighed more than their original form. The theory's downfall came not from a single experiment, but from the mounting evidence that combustion consumed something from the air rather than releasing something into it. Yet for over 100 years, the greatest minds in science had built their understanding of chemistry around a substance that simply did not exist.